The fastest way to lose someone's respect is often the moment you try hardest to earn it. Not because you said the wrong thing, but because you unknowingly accepted a role you were never supposed to play. Let me show you what I mean. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the strongest people almost never rush to defend themselves, and why the need to explain yourself often creates the very weakness you're trying to avoid. A father spends 30 years building a small business from nothing. His son, at 26, tells him he's leaving the family company to become a photographer. The father doesn't yell, he just looks at him and says quietly, "So all of this was for nothing." That's it. No raised voice. No ultimatum. Just one sentence, dropped like a stone into still water. And the son spends the next 2 years explaining himself, at Christmas dinners, in late-night phone calls, in 100 small conversations that all somehow circle back to proving that his choice was smart, that it will pay off, that he isn't ungrateful. He never notices the strange thing happening underneath all of it. He has made his father the judge of his life and appointed him for a position the man never actually applied for. People don't become your judge when they criticize you. They become your judge when you start presenting evidence. This is the part almost nobody catches. Defending yourself doesn't just fail to convince people, it quietly hands them a form of authority over you that they didn't have 30 seconds earlier. Before the comment, the father was just a man with an opinion. After the son starts explaining, the father has become something closer to a verdict giver, someone whose approval must now be earned. Nothing about the father changed. Something about the son did. That's the mechanism. Every time you defend a decision, a choice, a piece of your character, you are quietly agreeing that the other person's judgment carries enough weight to require a response. You're not proving them wrong, you're proving they mattered enough to need proving wrong to. And the strange part is, the moment you do that, it becomes true. Their opinion actually does start to matter more, because you just spent your energy orbiting it. Every explanation is a silent vote that someone else's opinion deserves your energy. Think about what happens the very first time you catch yourself explaining your salary to a friend who made an offhand comment about your job, or justifying your parenting to a sister who raised an eyebrow at bedtime rules, or over-explaining a text you sent 3 hours late to someone you're dating. In every one of these, nothing about the actual situation has gotten worse. What's changed is that you've silently signed a contract, one that says, "This person's read of me is something I now have to manage." Why do we do this so automatically, almost before we can stop ourselves? Because for most of human history, being misjudged by the group wasn't a minor social inconvenience, it was a survival risk. If the tribe decided you were lazy, dishonest, or dangerous, you could lose your place at the fire. So somewhere very old in the brain, a comment that even faintly suggests judgment triggers the same circuitry that used to protect you from being cast out. The trouble is, that circuitry doesn't check credentials. It doesn't ask whether this particular person, in this particular moment, actually has any standing to judge you at all. It just fires. A stranger's dismissive comment on a photo you posted can trip the same wire as an actual authority figure questioning your competence at work, even though one of those people has never met you and never will. This is where the real cost shows up, and it's not the cost people usually talk about. The cost isn't that you might lose the argument. The cost is what happens to your own sense of direction while you're busy trying to win it. A person who is constantly explaining themselves is a person who has quietly outsourced their compass. They stop checking in with what they actually think is true and start checking in with what would make the other person stop frowning. Watch this happen at work sometime. Someone gives a presentation, a colleague raises one skeptical eyebrow at a single slide, and for the rest of the meeting, the presenter is no longer talking to the room, they're talking to the eyebrow. Every sentence gets shaped around neutralizing one person's reaction instead of communicating the idea clearly. The idea gets worse, the presenter gets smaller, and the colleague, who maybe wasn't even that skeptical, watches all of this happen and quietly registers it. This person can be moved. Here's what's fascinating. Explaining yourself doesn't always make you look weaker. Sometimes it works. Sometimes people finally understand you. And that's exactly why this habit is so difficult to break. Because your brain remembers the rare times it paid off and quietly ignores the 100 times it didn't. Here's the part that reframes everything, though. Being moved isn't really about being wrong. It's about visibly needing someone's approval more than they need to give it. A relationship works the same way a scale does. Whoever needs the other person's good opinion less is, without saying a word, holding more weight on their side. The moment you start explaining, you've put your hand on the lighter side of that scale, and everyone in the room can feel it shift, even if they couldn't tell you why. So what does it look like when someone doesn't do this? Not because they're arrogant, not because they don't care what anyone thinks, but because they've simply stopped mistaking every comment for a summons. A woman gets a backhanded remark from her mother-in-law about how she runs her household, something like, "Well, I suppose everyone has their own way of doing things." A person still orbiting that opinion hears an accusation and starts building a defense. A person who has stopped doing this hears an opinion, one among many possible opinions, floating past, and simply lets it keep floating. Not cold, not combative, just unclaimed. She might even smile and say, I suppose so, and change the subject because she genuinely does not need the room to certify that her way of running a household is correct. Watch what happens to the comment when nobody catches it. It just falls to the floor and lies there, oddly deflated, because an accusation that nobody picks up isn't an accusation anymore. It's just a sentence someone said once. This is the actual difference between people who seem quietly unshakable and people who don't. It was never about having better arguments ready. It's that the unshakable ones have stopped treating every stray opinion as a court summons requiring their appearance. They've noticed something the rest of us take a lifetime to notice. Most people who criticize you have not actually been appointed to any position of authority over your life. They gave themselves the job, and a title nobody else confirmed can be quietly declined. This shows up even more clearly in romantic relationships because that's where the stakes feel highest and the instinct to defend is strongest. A partner says, half joking, "You never plan anything for us anymore." The instant automatic move is a list. Actually, I planned that dinner in March. I booked the trip in June. Watch what that list actually does. It doesn't calm the moment down. It turns a passing comment into an active case file, with both people now cross-referencing evidence. The alternative isn't to ignore the person you love. It's to hear the comment as information about how they're feeling, rather than a formal charge that requires a legal response. "I miss us doing more together" gets a completely different reply than "you never plan anything," even though functionally, someone just said the same true or untrue thing to you either way. The difference is entirely in whether you treat it as a claim to be litigated or a feeling to be met. None of this means never listening, never reflecting, never changing your mind. Real feedback from someone who actually knows you, actually loves you, actually has relevant standing, deserves real thought. But there's a difference between considering something because it might be true and defending against it because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. One comes from curiosity. The other comes from the same old circuitry that once kept you from being cast out of the fire circle, still firing away at people who couldn't banish you from anything if they tried. Here's the principle worth keeping. Nobody has authority over how you see yourself until you hand it to them, and the handing over doesn't happen when they speak. It happens the moment you answer, as if they had the right to ask. Law 27. The moment you feel the need to prove your worth, stop. Ask one question. Who decided they were qualified to judge me? Most people spend years answering questions that never deserved an answer. Quietly powerful people understand something different. Not every opinion earns a response, and not every voice earns a seat inside your mind. That's the rule no one taught you. This is Law 58. Have you ever caught yourself explaining something you never actually owed an explanation for? Tell me what it was in the comments. And if you've ever wondered why some people seem impossible to shake, watch the next video.